Hello and welcome back to the Sovereign Self Show. I'm your host, Lauren Chalantani, and this is a show you learn how to become that sovereign leader of your life and your business. And today we're talking about how shame is going to actually be your gateway, your portal into the fame, which basically means your success, your dreams, being able to be of service at a bigger capacity to make the massive impact, the massive income as this light worker 5D CEO that you knew you came to this lifetime for. So before we jump into today's show, if you're listening on any streaming podcast platform, please make sure you hit subscribe and write a review if you tag me at Lauren Chalantani or at Sovereign Self Show on Instagram. Make sure to give you a shout out and of course hook you up with some amazing freebies like a breathwork track and an ebook of how to actually tune in and show up and do the work. And if you haven't already, we are streaming full live episodes now on YouTube. And let me tell you, since I started reposting this on YouTube, it's been blowing up. So make sure if you are ready to tune in at a whole new level, hit that subscribe, make sure you turn on those notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. In today's episode, we're going over the shame to fame alchemization, the transmutation, because guess what? This is what's been active in me. And I thought this morning when I was going to record the show, what am I going to be recording? I have no idea. And of course, what was active in me is what I need to share and channel with the world. So today's episode, we're going to be diving into, okay, well, how is the shame leading you to the fame, being the 5D CEO self? We're going to dive into that sacral chakra, not so much a creative aspect of that energy, but the feeling, which is all about shame, and the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms around this energy, and also some actions or patterns to look out for that I've seen in myself and the wonderful, amazing clients that I have the privilege of working with. And then lastly, we're going to go dive deep into how to shift into this respect. So for me, when I was tuning into this energy that's been coming up, to be honest, this past few weeks, definitely heightened over the eclipse season here. Shame on one end of the spectrum. What is it guiding me towards? What is it, the obstacle's the way, the shame is the way. Well, what is the other side of that way? And I was journaling about it, and, the right answer, quote unquote, is, oh, self-love, my authentic self, but honestly just felt like bullshit fluff. While I'm saying it and writing it to myself and I'm crossing it out in my journal. And then respect came. Because when you respect yourself, you show up. When you respect yourself, you take the actions. You love yourself when you respect yourself. So we're going to be diving deep into all of that juiciness in today's episode. But I wanted to first kind of dive into my own story of how this was coming up. And many years ago, in a past relationship, that kind of really started me on this path that inspired me to start my original podcast before this, Witchy Wellness Radio. And the mantra, your body is leading the way, it's not in the way, was because I had some sacral stuff coming up, a lot of shame to be cleared, to be healed, to be transmuted. And in this relationship, my body was very vocal that this was not for me. And all the symptoms, all of the diagnoses from that sacral center. As a woman, UTIs constantly, yeast infections, mysterious pelvic pain, all of these things that wouldn't go away, that weren't normal for me whatsoever until I actually left that relationship. And honestly have had like zero of those symptoms since, and that has been many, many moons ago. Until the past week. I woke up feeling like kind of UTI feeling in my body, but I'm like, that's weird. What's happening? And this week a lot of anger and frustration was coming up emotionally. And kind of the feeling that was coming up is like, I should be further along than I am in all areas of life. That was kind of like the underlying belief. And when I first tuned in and heard the inner talk of myself say, should, I knew exactly where we were going with this. I knew exactly why this was coming up. When you should all over yourself, 99% of the time, if not all the time, it's shame. Shame is I'm doing something wrong or I am wrong. And the shoulda, woulda, coulda energy is a really easy kind of way to catch that in your self talk, catch that when you're journaling or talking to your friend or your partner. So for me, the physical symptoms were coming up. For me, the emotional symptoms, the patterns, the thoughts, the belief systems were coming up. And as I was working through this energy, I'm like, oh my gosh, every time I've gone through this beautiful portal of shame coming up, my life has exploded in a beautiful way. My business has exploded in a beautiful way. Every single time I've been able to, I almost hesitate saying the word own. I've stepped through it with a new level of respect and a new level of reverence for who I am. And then my reality changes. And I see it time and time again, with my clients as well. One of my clients is very vocal about her past relationship and, being in an abusive situation. And she kind of put that into her mantra of her business that she opened up. And she was surprised. She was blown out of the water. The women she was attracting were in similar situations. And actually, through working with her, without her knowing, left those relationships. And she was just blown away. But, the work that we do together, the work that she did, I can't really take credit here, let's be honest, of seeing the shame, owning it, and then having the self-respect to taking a different action. I mean, reality, people could stay in relationships like that all the time. But she loved herself so much. She respected herself so much that she knew it was no longer in alignment. And now look at her leading the way and attracting her own tribe, her own dream clients who are going through the same thing, who are growing through the same thing. And another example of a beautiful client I work with, she came to me because she was like, oh my gosh, I've been stuck in survival. I've been, in the fear, the lack, the worry, anxiety loop for years now. And it's affecting me, of course, but it's also affecting my business. So we were really working on that inner loop. A lot of it was shame work too, of disassociating from really what's going on, feeling what's coming up in her body, to last week, she was about to kind of practice the similar pattern coming up, getting in bed, putting Netflix on, binging. We've all been there. And she caught herself and she was like, I have a choice right now. I could, if it's best for me, I could stay in bed and watch Netflix, or I can go to the gym and move my body. And in that moment, she knew that split decision, I need to go move my body. And she did. And her business has been blowing up since we've worked together. She's manifested new clients from emails she sent in April of this past year. The podcast she's been on, like for the past 2 years, new clients, referrals, discovery calls have been coming in. She's freaking rocking it. All of these areas that she didn't expect, money is flowing into because she is in her day-to-day life really respecting and loving herself. She's seeing the shame, she's seeing the patterns, and then showing up differently, taking the action, which I think is going to be quite the theme today. Are you going to let shame keep you in this ball of emotions and disassociation and playing small? Or are you going to show up in that respect? Love yourself enough to change, love yourself to do something differently. And I want to loop it back to my story I just shared, and I'm sure these beautiful women can relate to this too, is when these emotions come up, especially something strong like shame, if you're feeling physical symptoms or something in your reality is really mirroring this to you, ask yourself, where did this come up before? Whether it's shame or some whatever emotion's coming up. And that kind of was the gateway for me, hearing myself say, oh my gosh, I should be further along, judging myself. And then, oh my gosh, I felt this way emotionally, physically in that past relationship. Okay, what was going on then? And I think even more importantly is, what did I learn in that experience? And what am I learning now? Because we don't get to the state of quote unquote perfection, of never feeling shame, never feeling any lower vibrational emotions again, not in this earthly plane, because they're there to help us grow. They're our emotional guidance system, and our GPS, aka our emotions, are never judging us. They don't care if we disassociated. They don't care if we're full of shame and doubt and regret. Those emotions are here just showing you, saying, hey, you were supposed to take this left and you didn't. So why don't you take the next left, essentially? And when we look at it that way, it kind of takes the pressure off of ourselves. It allows us to kind of take a deep release and start to own how we are feeling. And that leads me into the second part of today's episode of tuning into the sacral chakra energy, all about emotions. And as women, if you're listening to this, I truly believe we have this innate ability as a woman to feel at a deeper capacity. Not to say men can't as well, but it's just an inherent gift, especially around our menstrual cycle. This is all coming up for me during my luteal phase right now, which is right before your period. And that's the time when people or women are deemed over emotional, dramatic, all of the PMS quote unquote symptoms come up. Those are coming up as your emotional guidance system to help show you a different perspective than what you're seeing. And the reason why I always refer to it as the GPS is because your destination, which is your inner being, which is God, source, your soul, whatever you want to call it, is simply looking at your current state of reality, whatever vibration you're in, from a different perspective. And your emotions, let's say the lower end of the spectrum, the anger, the shame, the discontent, are just showing you, oh, okay, there's something coming up, my belief system or a pattern that isn't in alignment with who I already am. And I really want to underline this part is, it's not about, I say GPS, it's not about an end destination. This expansion, higher version of you, this vibrational version of you, your oversoul, is already here. It's not about trying to become that. It's already you. So it's just about keeping up with that expansion or that version of you that's here. And that's how our emotional guidance system is showing us the way. And back to the sacral chakra energy here, all about emotions. That's where a lot of our emotions lie. So specifically around shame for me, and I've seen in many clients that I've worked with over the years, imposter syndrome is going to come up as one of those emotional kind of feelings. Anxiety an easy way to mask the shame underneath. Being embarrassed for, like what program was coming up for me. I'm not as far along as I think I should be. Or, whatever it is, your deep, darkest thing that you're ashamed about, that you feel like if somebody finds out about you, it's going to ruin your career. It's going to ruin you, like the shameful stuff that isn't really shameful, but it's the way that we are interpreting it right now. So sometimes the anxiety and the fear and the quick reactions of being in survival is actually masking, it's trying to protect us from the shame. And lastly, overwhelm. For me, it's like overwhelm feeling there's not enough time, there's too much to do. Oh my gosh. Just the feeling of like, overwhelm. A lot of the time can show up underneath as the shame. Some of the physical stuff we talked about, sacral chakra for women, UTIs, yeast infections, any physical PMS symptom, PCOS, anything hormonal related to our physical anatomy as a woman. And that was definitely a deep, 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 deep lesson that I learned through the first time I went around this shame portal. And now I'm realizing how freaking powerful I already know this, but sharing this at a deeper level of how powerful our bodies truly are, especially our reproductive system as women. Every single month, this is a beautiful opportunity to deep dive into the inner work, to, as Eckhart Tolle says, the pain body is wide open. So whatever is ready to be transmuted into the light, into who you already are, is going to come up during our cycles. And this is such a blessing for us as women to tune into, to harness the power of. And if we're having physical symptoms around our menstruation cycle, around the anatomy, usually it has to deal with a lot of shame being stuck in our body, in our hips. That's all, in yoga, as a yoga teacher, I'm sure, raise your hand if you have cried during pigeon pose before. I know everybody has. Every single person has, because so much emotion is stored in our sacral center. So much emotion is in our hips, is in the physical body. And lastly, the sacral shame feeling energy, looking out for different actions or patterns to look out for that you might be in the shame spiral loop. Disassociation. You don't want to feel. What is our sacral chakra? What are we talking about today? Feeling energy. So when you disassociate, and however your poison of choice is, whether it's Netflix, whether it's doom scrolling on Instagram, maybe binge eating, whatever kind of you notice yourself wanting to disassociate to not feel or feel better, look out for that, because there are some deeper patterns, deeper belief systems that are coming up in the area of shame, in the area of your sacral center. And lastly, how to shift this energy. We talked about it a little bit, but let's go into it juicy, into respect. Shame to your fame. I think we've talked about it this episode, but you really need to be honest with how you're feeling. Whether it's shame or whatever's coming up, you just need to be real with how you are feeling. The thoughts that are coming up in your head, start where you're at. Because we layer on that level of shame and judgment sometimes over how we're actually feeling, because I should know better. I should be better. I should act better. But just be real with how you feel. Step 1. Step 2, when did I remember feeling this last? Like, when was the last time shame or whatever emotion came up? Write about a part of your life, whatever story comes up, whether it's childhood, 5 years ago, 5 months ago, write about that, because that's going to help you see what portal you were going through then. And if it's coming up now, you are going through some sort of a similar portal today, right now in your body. And then from there, asking yourself, well, what am I learning now? Am I still learning the same lesson? Am I learning a different facet of this? That's going to really help you start to get clear on the other side of that emotion. Maybe you're shifting it into respect. Maybe it's shifting into something else. And then step 3, who do I need to be? Meaning, who am I already? in this energy of respect, in this other side of this emotional portal. Who do I show up now? What am I learning that I actually already am? How do I take the actions? Because you can apply this to any emotions, but when it comes to respect, it's kind of the self-respect of love, of choosing different, being different, taking the actions differently than you normally do in the self-sabotage, than you normally do in the disassociation, than you normally do when you are just, you know, pity party on the floor. And every time I do this, and especially this week, I'm like, okay, well, what manifested, what changed in my life? Well, I've been thinking about, I love talking and I love going on podcasts, and I haven't recently. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of on the back burner. Let's start pitching myself for more shows. I love talking and co-creating, all the beautiful stuff. Well, an opportunity literally came into my lap for a free PR opportunity, for like a few months of free PR, which is freaking crazy that I just let it go. And because I am showing up differently, because I'm going through this shame portal and being present, all of these things, universe, your inner being wants the best for you. And when you don't have resistance to your desires, they will come through. They will come to you manifested in your reality. And not only the PR opportunity came through, while I started posting my episodes again on YouTube. And y'all, it is blowing up. I'm not about the numbers, but to see that different energy of me showing up, going through the shame portal into the respect of loving myself, the numbers are skyrocketing. I'm approaching my creativity from a different point of view, a different level. And also my own personal stuff about just loving myself and accepting myself, being more gracious while still showing up differently, which has resulted in more confidence and more reverence for myself. And of course, goes without saying, every time I'm going through a portal like this, meaning, big patterns are coming up, my clients are blowing up too. Whether they're getting new leads coming through, manifestations are happening that they've been waiting for forever. The universe is showing up and reminding them how powerful they are. Not just seeing 11:11 on the clock. Being able to really be reminded those synchronicities and manifestations that are unshakable. You can't make this shit up. When you're in the darkest of your darkest nights of the soul, those are the kind of moments when you go back to and say, remember when this happened? Because that's who I am. And I know whatever I'm going through right now is here guiding me, leading me to another magical part of life to be experienced, to be seen. And lastly, I challenge you guys today, once you get off this podcast or even press pause, go on Spotify, turn a playlist on, move your body, speak to your womb space, speak to your sacral center. What does she want you to know? How does she want you to move? What would respect feel like? How would you move out of respect? What would you be? What would you do? And just tune into that portal through your womb space of feeling what you need to feel and transmuting that into the respect to show up different, the confidence to show up differently, the reverence for yourself to show up differently, because you trust who you are, you trust the universe, you trust the fact that everything is always working out for you and every single person, being, creature, whatever, this entire plane of existence. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the Sovereign Self Show. Again, I am your host, Lauren Celentani. It's been such an honor and pleasure to share from my heart, my soul to yours. If you haven't already subscribed, please hit subscribe, write a review. That helps us out so much to be able to reach more beautiful light workers just like yourself so that you too can become the leader of your life and your business. Until next time.